The old man stepped into the courtroom with chains around his wrists, his eyes lowered, his shoulders heavy with years. "State your name," the clerk asked, barely glancing up. His voice trembled. "Raymond Harris, Sergeant, United States Army." No one in the room expected what came next. As the judge skimmed through the case file, her fingers stopped mid-page, her face went pale. She knew that name. It belonged to the soldier who had once dragged her brother to safety under enemy fire in Kandahar and vanished before anyone could thank him. If you believe that true honor never fades, even when the world forgets, comment respect below. And to see how this courtroom turned into a tribute, subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories. Raymond Harris, 71, sat quietly on the courtroom bench, his shoulders slouched beneath a worn military jacket at least 2 sizes too big. The cold fluorescent lights made every deep crease stand out, lines carved by years of hardship across a face that once held pride. Decades ago, he'd stood straight in full dress uniform, medals bright on his chest. Now he waited for judgment in second-hand clothes from a donation bin. The bailiff called his case, Docket 62A. City of Crest Hill vs. Raymond Harris. Charges: disturbing the peace, trespassing, resisting arrest. Raymond rose slowly, his joints stiff, his movements heavy with age and injury, arthritis and old wounds that never healed right. Vietnam first, then Kuwait, both left scars, some the world could see, most it couldn't. "Mr. Harris," the prosecutor began, a young man, polished, confident, standing in a press suit and bright tie. "He's been warned multiple times about loitering behind the Maple Avenue Cafe. The owner has submitted 3 formal complaints just this month." What he didn't mention was this: Raymond hadn't been causing trouble. He'd been sitting in silence by the back dumpster near the kitchen's heat vent, trying to stay warm on the bitterest nights. He never begged, never harassed anyone, just looked for a place where the wind wouldn't cut through his bones. Officer Daniel Reyes gave his statement, saw the defendant behind the cafe around 11:45 p.m., told him to move. He refused, but Raymond hadn't refused. He'd quietly asked for a few more minutes, enough time to finish the half sandwich the cook had handed him through the back door, quietly without a word, but explaining that then it felt pointless. "Just like now, Your Honor," the prosecutor continued, voice crisp, "this marks Mr. Harris's 3rd citation this year. We recommend mandatory community service and a 30-day no trespass order across the downtown zone." What that meant in reality: he'd be banned from the only shelter he could get into, the one on 5th Street, no access to the warm meals served every Tuesday and Thursday at Grace Mission Church, no place to be when winter hit hardest. "Mr. Harris," Judge Evelyn Grant finally spoke, looking at him directly, "do you have legal representation today?" Raymond shook his head once. The public defender assigned to him had been called away for another case. "Would you like to make a statement on your own behalf?" the judge asked, peering at him over the rim of her glasses. Raymond cleared his throat, his voice rough from disuse. "No excuses, Your Honor, just trying to stay warm." "Any particular reason you chose that spot?" Judge Grant asked, something unreadable behind her composed expression. Raymond hesitated. "The cook, Jason, sometimes leaves food out back. I've known him since he was a kid. His father and I served together during Desert Storm." "And your military background?" she asked, even though it wasn't standard protocol in these hearings. "United States Army, 1971 to 1996, Staff Sergeant, 2nd Battalion, 7th Infantry, Iraq." The words came easily, like muscle memory, a flicker of clarity and quiet pride cutting through the haze. Judge Grant made a note and continued reading the file. Something in Raymond's service record seemed to stop her, her pen hovered. "But what happened next will leave you stunned." Before she could speak again, the courtroom doors opened. A sharply dressed man in a dark tailored suit entered, carrying a leather briefcase. He walked directly to the public defender's table and addressed the court. "Your Honor, Nicholas Avery, on behalf of the defendant, apologies for the interruption, I've just been retained." Raymond turned startled. He hadn't called anyone, couldn't afford a lawyer, let alone one who looked like that. "This is highly irregular, Mr. Avery," Judge Grant noted. "The court was given no notice of representation." "It's a very recent development, Your Honor," Avery said calmly. "I'd like to request a brief recess to confer with my client." The judge studied him, then glanced at Raymond. Her expression didn't reveal a thing. "The court will take a 15-minute recess," she said, standing abruptly and disappearing into her chambers. Raymond turned to the man beside him. "I don't have money for a lawyer." "You don't need any," Avery replied gently. "Our firm, Lawson, Avery, and Grant, is taking your case pro bono." Raymond frowned at the last name, Grant, like the judge? "Exactly like the judge," Avery confirmed. In her chambers, Judge Evelyn Grant removed her glasses with shaking hands. 20 years on the bench had taught her composure, no matter who stood in her courtroom, but nothing had prepared her for this. "It can't be the same man," she whispered, though every detail matched too closely. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a worn photo, a younger version of herself, standing next to her brother, Lieutenant Adam Grant, in full army dress uniform. His arm rested on her shoulders, both smiled wide, proud, unknowing. Beside it sat Adam's final letter from Iraq, its edges soft from years of rereading. In that letter, he had described a brutal firefight outside Kandahar. His unit had been trapped, pinned down by gunfire. "If it weren't for Staff Sergeant Harris," Adam had written, "none of us would have made it. He ran through open fire to reach one of our guys who'd gone down, then laid cover so the rest of us could drag out the wounded." 2 weeks later, Adam was killed by an IED. Evelyn remembered the military funeral, the folded flag pressed into her parents' hands, and the soldier who had approached them afterward. "Your son saved my life," he'd said. "I was the one he pulled to safety." He hadn't finished the sentence, he didn't need to. That soldier's name had been Raymond Harris. After the funeral, Evelyn had tried to find him, desperate to hear more about her brother's final days, but the army informed her that Sergeant Harris had already been redeployed. Years later, her inquiries revealed he'd been honorably discharged after suffering severe PTSD and a traumatic brain injury during his last deployment. A knock on the door pulled her from the memory. Nicholas Avery stepped inside, his face carried concern. "Evelyn, what's going on?" he asked. As her late husband's former law partner and one of the few people who still used her first name, he didn't need to pretend. "It's him, Nick," she said quietly, gesturing toward the photo, "the soldier who saved Adam, the one who pulled him out under fire." Avery's eyes widened as he pieced it together. "The man in the courtroom? That's Sergeant Harris? The one you've been searching for all these years?" Evelyn nodded. "His service record confirms it. Kandahar, 2003, same unit as Adam." He was awarded the Silver Star for the exact action Adam described in his last letter. "Does he know who you are?" "I don't think so," she said softly. "I married Thomas after law school, changed my last name to Grant, and it's been 20 years. She paused, collecting herself. "What happened to him, Nick? How does a decorated soldier end up homeless and in my courtroom just for trying to stay warm?" Avery shook his head. "From what little he shared, it's what we've seen too many times. PTSD after his final tour. His wife left him while he was still overseas. VA benefits got lost in red tape. He worked construction for a while, but the injuries caught up with him. Then came the layoffs, the eviction, the streets." Evelyn closed her eyes, hearing her brother's voice again. "Harris is the best of us," Adam had once written, "the kind of leader who'd give everything for the men beside him without ever needing thanks. If I can be half the officer he is, I'll have done something right." "What are you going to do?" Avery asked gently. "You could recuse yourself." "No," Evelyn said firmly, "I'm not letting him disappear again. You know there are ethical issues here." "I'm well aware," she straightened, her voice steady once more, "but there are also ethical issues in how we treat those who gave everything for this country." When Judge Grant returned to the courtroom, her posture was flawless, her expression calm, but those who knew her closely might have noticed a faint tremble in her hands as she arranged the papers in front of her. "Mr. Avery," she said formally, "has your client decided how he wishes to proceed?" The attorney stood. "Your Honor, we're requesting a full dismissal of all charges. My client was simply seeking shelter from dangerously cold conditions, a basic human need. Additionally, we can provide testimony that Mr. Harris had informal permission from cafe staff to be near the building." The prosecutor started to speak, but Judge Grant lifted one hand, a small gesture that silenced him immediately. "I have a few questions for the defendant," she said, turning her attention to Raymond. "Mr. Harris, your service record indicates you were deployed in Kandahar in 2003, is that correct?" Raymond straightened a little. Old instincts, decades of discipline, briefly overrode the fatigue in his body. "Yes, Your Honor, 2nd Battalion, 7th Infantry." "And on June 19, 2003, were you involved in a mission on the city's western outskirts?" Confusion crossed Raymond's face for a moment. "Yes, ma'am, we were escorting a supply convoy, came under heavy fire." "During that engagement," the judge continued, her voice unnervingly steady, "did you rescue a wounded soldier? A Lieutenant Adam Grant under enemy fire?" The courtroom fell silent. Raymond's eyes narrowed, distant memories pulling themselves forward. "Lieutenant Grant," he repeated slowly. "Yes, young officer, brave one. He was hit trying to reach a wounded medic." Raymond's voice lowered. "I reached him, pulled him behind a wall. He kept telling me to leave him, to go help the others first." In the gallery, a silver-haired man in an Army veteran's jacket leaned forward, suddenly alert. "And what happened to Lieutenant Grant?" the judge asked. Her face was composed, but her voice carried something deeper beneath. "We got into the medevac," Raymond said softly. "I heard he made it to Germany, but a few weeks later, he was out on patrol again, his vehicle hit an IED." His voice cracked slightly. "I've spent years wondering if I did more harm than good. Got him out only for him to." The silver-haired man in the gallery stood abruptly, unable to stay silent. "That's him," he called out. "That's Staff Sergeant Harris. I was there. He saved 6 of us that day." Judge Grant brought her gavel down once sharply. "Order," she said, though her voice didn't carry its usual weight. The room fell quiet again, tension hanging heavy in the air. Raymond Harris stared at the floor, uneasy under the sudden spotlight, but the silver-haired veteran remained standing. "Eyes steady, Your Honor," the prosecutor finally said, recovering. "While Mr. Harris's military service is commendable, it doesn't pertain to the court disagrees," Judge Grant said, cutting him off. "It has every bearing." She set the gavel down with intent. "This court will take a 10-minute recess. Bailiff, please ensure Mr. Harris remains in the room." As she rose from her seat, she paused, making eye contact with the defendant for the first time. It was direct, measured, and deeply personal. "Mr. Harris," she said quietly, "when I return, there are matters beyond these charges we need to discuss." She stepped into her chambers, closing the door behind her, and for the first time that day, her composure cracked. She pressed her fingers to her lips, trying to steady the wave of emotion that had been buried for nearly 20 years. It surged all at once, quiet, powerful, and unstoppable. After a long breath, she reached for her office phone. "Colonel Reeves, it's Judge Evelyn Grant." "Yes, it's been a while. I need your help, and I can't wait." 15 minutes later, when she stepped back into the courtroom, she wasn't alone. 3 uniformed Army personnel followed: a full colonel, a master sergeant, and a corporal carrying a wooden case that gleamed even under the fluorescent lights. The room stirred, people leaned in, whispering quickly. Raymond Harris instinctively stood at the sight of the uniforms. His body moved before his mind caught up, old training rising to the surface. Judge Grant took her seat, but this time she didn't reach for her glasses. Instead, she placed them on the bench beside her and looked straight ahead. What came next wasn't spoken as a judge, it was spoken as a sister. "Before we continue, I need to make something clear," she said, her voice calm, but weighted. "There is a personal link between this case and my family. The lieutenant named Adam Grant, the one Mr. Harris mentioned earlier, was my brother." A stunned murmur moved through the gallery. Raymond's eyes locked onto hers, stunned. His expression shifted, disbelief tangled with faint recognition. 2 decades ago," she continued, "my brother wrote home about a soldier who saved his life in Kandahar, a man who charged through enemy fire to drag him to cover, a man who laid down suppressive fire so others in their unit could escape." Her voice remained composed, but something deeper trembled beneath. That soldier was Staff Sergeant Raymond Harris. From the gallery, the silver-haired man stood abruptly. "It's true, Your Honor," he said loud and unwavering. "I was there." Harris was hit twice getting the lieutenant out. Judge Grant gave a small nod of acknowledgement. "Just 2 weeks after that mission," she continued, "my brother was killed in action. At his funeral, other soldiers came to tell us about Adam's bravery, but more than one of them spoke about the sergeant who gave him those extra 2 weeks, time we wouldn't have had otherwise." She looked directly at Raymond. "After my brother passed, I tried to find you, Sergeant Harris. The Army said you'd been redeployed right away. Years later, they confirmed you were discharged, but your location was never disclosed." Raymond didn't move. His face, worn by time, held still, a quiet mask of emotion and memory. "I never stopped searching," Judge Grant continued, "and now, through what can only be described as fate or divine timing, you're here in front of me." She motioned toward the colonel beside her, who stepped forward. "Colonel Stephen Reeves served under my brother. He has something to share." Colonel Reeves walked up to the bench. "Staff Sergeant Harris, the Army has been trying to contact you for years. Your file was among thousands selected for review under the Veterans Reconsideration Initiative. New evidence regarding your deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan prompted a full reassessment of your commendations and VA status." The corporal at his side stepped forward, opened the case in his hands. Inside, a medal rested against navy blue velvet, its ribbon bright and unmistakable, by directive of the Secretary of the Army, and in recognition of extraordinary bravery and selfless conduct on June 19, 2003, the Distinguished Service Cross is hereby awarded to Staff Sergeant Raymond J. Harris, United States Army. A stunned reaction rippled through the room. The Distinguished Service Cross, second only to the Medal of Honor. Previously restricted intel, Colonel Reeves added, now confirms your actions that day not only saved Lieutenant Grant and 5 others, but prevented an ambush that would have devastated the entire convoy. Your Silver Star has been officially upgraded. Raymond's expression finally cracked, his voice was low, almost breaking. "There must be a mistake," he said. "I was only doing what I was supposed to." "No mistake, Sergeant," Reeves replied, "and it's been far too long in coming." From the gallery, a voice rang out, "Attention on deck." It came from the silver-haired veteran. He rose, back straight, hand lifted in salute. One after another, others followed, some in uniform, most not, but all with posture that said they knew exactly what that moment meant. Even the prosecutor, caught between formality and decency, slowly stood. Judge Grant, tears now visible, turned back toward the court. Her voice was unsteady, but certain. "In light of these circumstances, all charges against Staff Sergeant Raymond Harris are dismissed with prejudice." She struck her gavel with finality. "This court stands adjourned." As the formalities concluded, the Master Sergeant approached Raymond with a tablet. "Sir, we've been trying to locate you to process your corrected VA benefits. Your disability rating has been reassessed at 100% service-connected retroactive to your discharge date." "What does that mean?" Raymond asked, still overwhelmed. "It means substantial back pay, sir," the sergeant replied, "and full medical coverage, housing allowance, and education benefits, should you wish to use them." Nicholas Avery stepped forward. "And our firm will ensure all of this is processed immediately, Mr. Harris. No more bureaucratic delays." From the back of the courtroom, Jason, the cook who had been leaving food for Raymond, approached with tears in his eyes. "My dad always said there was a soldier who saved his whole unit," said. "If I ever met a Raymond Harris, I owed him everything. Never realized it was you all this time." He extended his hand. "Sir." The prosecutor, visibly moved, approached Raymond as well. "Sir, I had no idea. Please accept my apology for how this matter was handled." Raymond stood amid the sudden attention, dignity returning to his posture moment by moment as though the weight of unacknowledged honor had been lifted from his shoulders. Judge Grant descended from the bench, professional distance abandoned. She stopped before Raymond, her voice soft but clear. "My brother wrote that you told him something when you pulled him to safety. You said, 'No soldier gets left behind while I'm breathing.' Today, Sergeant Harris, we finally fulfilled that same promise to you." 2 weeks later, Raymond Harris stood before a mirror in an apartment he still couldn't believe was his. The Veterans Affairs housing program had expedited his case, placing him in a one-bedroom unit in a complex specifically designed for formerly homeless veterans. The walls were bare except for one frame, a display case holding his newly awarded Distinguished Service Cross alongside his Purple Hearts and original service medals that Nicholas Avery had somehow tracked down from a storage unit. Sold off years earlier. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Judge Evelyn Grant stood in the hallway, no longer in robes, holding a small box in her hands. "May I come in, Sergeant Harris?" she asked. Raymond stepped aside and nodded, still feeling out of place in his new life. "Please, just Raymond is fine, Your Honor." "Then I'm just Evelyn," she replied with a faint smile, "at least outside the courtroom." They sat in the modest living area, the air quiet, the weight of their shared history hanging gently between them. "I brought something I thought you might want to see," Evelyn said, opening the box and pulling out a bundle of folded papers. "These are letters from Adam. He wrote to us every week while deployed." She handed one to Raymond. "This one mentions you directly. He wrote it the day after you saved him." Raymond's hands trembled as he unfolded the page. Lieutenant Grant's handwriting was clean, meticulous, exactly as Raymond remembered from the field. "Mom and Dad," he read aloud, "don't worry about what you're hearing. I'm safe because of one of my NCOs. Staff Sergeant Harris did something yesterday that I still can't process. When our unit came under fire, he ran through it like it wasn't even there. I ordered him to leave me. He wouldn't. He just said, 'No soldier gets left behind, not on my watch.'" Raymond's voice cracked. "He wrote about you often," Evelyn said quietly, "said you were the kind of leader he hoped to become." "He was a good officer," Raymond replied, "young, but he took care of his men. That's not common." She motioned toward the apartment around them. "All of this, the housing program, the Veterans Court, the outreach, it started because of what Adam wrote, because of what he said about you, about how the system fails, even the ones who gave everything." Raymond looked away, uncomfortable. "I'm not a hero," he muttered. "That's what heroes always say," Evelyn replied gently. She hesitated, then continued, "There's something else. The day Adam died, he was leading a mission to locate an insurgent group targeting civilians. He volunteered. In his last letter, he said he was trying to live up to the standard you set." Those words hit harder than any wound. For 2 decades, Raymond had questioned if pulling Adam out of that firefight had only delayed the inevitable, if it had even mattered. "He didn't die because of you, Raymond," Evelyn said as if reading his thoughts. "He lived the way he did because of you." They sat in silence, two people connected not just by grief, but by memory and meaning. Outside, snow began to fall softly, a hush blanketed the street below. Finally, Raymond spoke, barely above a whisper. All those years on the street, I thought nobody remembered. I thought it didn't mean anything in the end. It meant everything, Evelyn said, to Adam, to the others, and to me. As she rose to leave, she gently touched Raymond's shoulder. Adam used to say, the measure of a soldier isn't what they do when the world is watching, it's what they do when no one is. You've lived that truth, Raymond, even when the world looked away. He stood a little taller, something in his stance finally restored. Someone remembered my name, he said. After all this time, someone remembered. In that quiet moment, something long fractured began to mend, not just for Raymond Harris, but for everyone whose sacrifices never made the headlines. Some people save others from death, but spend a lifetime with no one to save them from being forgotten. Honor doesn't need a stage, sometimes all it takes is a single moment to help someone stand tall again. If you believe no one who served should ever be forgotten, comment respect to stand for dignity, memory, and justice, and subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories to hear the voices others leave behind.